Good morning, everyone. Hello.
Good morning.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning.
So welcome to the GE Conference Conversations for the Mathematics, Science, and Technology, or the MST cluster. Okay. So I see we have 39 participants logged on to Zoom, and I think this is also being streamed to other platforms. So welcome and magandang umaga. So I am Rachel Gotanco. I will be the moderator for this session. It is our honor to have with us this morning five panelists from selected GE courses within the MST domain. So these are landscape architecture, MS1 or Oceans and Us, NASC4, which is natural sciences, geology 1, and DRMAPS. So they will be sharing with us their experience with transitioning and teaching the GE courses to the online environment and the challenges of teaching it in this current situation. So before we begin, just a few, just a general introduction to the theme. No? So a common theme with these 5 GE courses is that most, if not all of them, or at least before the pandemic, relied heavily on having their students experience, explore, and interact with the natural world as well as the built environment. So all of these courses are also highly interdisciplinary, involving faculty in the fields of natural sciences, engineering, and technology, as well as psychology or the science of human behavior and the social sciences. So today we will hear about their experiences, their challenges, and the adjustments and the innovations they designed in transitioning the courses to our current mode so that we can continue to deliver the hallmark of general education to our students. So I'd like to introduce our first panelist, um, architect Franklin S. Fontanoza Jr. So he is a licensed landscape architect. He graduated with a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture and he has a Master's in Tropical Landscape Architecture from the College of Architecture, University of the Philippines. He's currently working as an assistant professor at UP Diliman. He's previously worked as a University Research Associate and lecturer, also from the College of Architecture. He's also had experience as a designer with various firms such as VHS Philippines Limited, Mega World Corporation, and Palafox Associates. So, good morning, Architect Fontanoza. You have the floor.
Good morning, Ma'am Rachel. All right. Good morning, everyone. Share screen, please. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Steph. Okay. Good morning. On behalf of the LA1 faculty, I will be sharing our experiences so far in teaching Landscape Architecture 1 or LA1 in a remote environment. Next, please. As an overview of today's presentation, I will touch base on the following points: a short history and the current setup of how we teach LA1, what is Landscape Architecture 1, what we did to prepare for the remote teaching, the challenges we encountered, and how we try to address them, and what we look forward to in the next few years to come. Next, please. So as a short history, LA1 was offered by the UP College of Architecture as early as 2004. We were teaching them with a volume of 25 to 35 students per class. Next, please. But currently, we limited our classes now to 23 to 25 students per class to make it more manageable. And it is now offered under the studio laboratory of the Environmental Landscape Studio Laboratory in the UP College of Architecture. Next, please. So what is LA1? Aptly titled as Designing Eden, an introduction to Philippine landscape architecture. Our main goal as a GE course is to expand the students' knowledge on the application of landscape architecture in our daily lives. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, in one of the first few activities of the course, we ask our students to visualize, describe, and illustrate what their idea of Eden or a perfect landscape is. Their outputs show commonalities such as wide open space where one can move around without restrictions, and the presence of natural elements such as sunlight, water, or vegetation. There are some that have no people in it, while some do. This may show that some students either imagine Eden as a personal space or something that can be enjoyed when shared. That, or maybe they just didn't have enough time to draw them. So from this vantage point, we take off describing landscape architecture as a discipline and profession that deals with open spaces, nature, and people. Both an art and science, its scope lies in the planning, design, management, and stewardship of the natural and built environment to make them aesthetically pleasing, functional, and respectful of the environment. Following the activity, the course modules are rolled out on specific weeks, starting from prehistory, Middle Ages, Renaissance, Oriental, Romantic to contemporary landscapes. And then we touch on the natural sciences and social sciences and the arts, including topics on geology, geography, biology, ecology, technology and planning, and of course, collaboration with other design professionals. Then we cap it off with Philippine landscape architecture, mainly sharing prominent landscape architects and their works and their significance to us. Next, please. All right. So what we did to prepare, we shared a course pack, a study guide. We also provided a calendar and a project brief or annexes for each activity. We were actually guided by the strategies discussed by Ma'am Portia Padilla in one of the webinars offered by by UP. And then we also were able to determine which days are synchronous and asynchronous. We also adjusted certain outputs. On pre-pandemic, one of the activities was making a dish garden, but now we opted to make it more online by having our students come up with a video of the cultural benefits and local application of plants as sourced and used in the landscape. So one class did the benefits of plants or their use as food or as ingredients to food. One class also did an alamat type, and the other one is based on medicinal plants. So we also selected a tech-friendly LMS, of course. For our class, I actually selected Google Classroom and Google Drive. And we also supplemented them with webinars that are provided by the Environmental Landscape Studio Laboratory in the UP College of Architecture as well. Next, please. So these are just sample works of my students, of our students in LA1. Next, please. And then for the challenges, next, please. First is connectivity. Of course, there's that connection problem with the internet, which worsened during the typhoon. A personal connection was limited. I can't tell my usual jokes in class. There's also that disconnect in the natural and physical environment. Field trips, basic landscape architectural skills, and projects we expose to students are discontinued due to safety purposes. Next, please. Unresponsiveness, well, there are some students who don't reply anymore to emails, and I also lost attendance to my classes. Originally, I started with 25. I ended up with around 17. Next, please. And then mental health issues. There are some students who actually reached out feeling anxious. I have working students, COVID scare students, demands of major courses are also present. Next, please. So what we did, flexibility. So the submission dates were adjusted, removed a previously required output, but making sure that the outcomes are achieved. The tools they used are also adjusted from hand-drawn to the use of software. And also we did allow the students to select if they want to do the projects individually, pairing, or as groups. Next, please. Find a common ground. I related to my students actually since I experienced the remote learning myself. I was in the terminal stages of my master's degree when the pandemic happened. Basically saying that I'm also human like them and exposed to that kind of challenges, those challenges. I related the lessons to current events or things that they feel passionate about. And since they come from different programs, it makes it more inclusive, which is actually the main idea of the GE program. Next, please. Mainly to feel appreciated as part of their activity feedback, making sure that I appreciate them for coming to class. And it actually goes both ways. I feel more motivated to do better and give them my best because I don't think there's no greater reward at the end of a tiring semester than hearing my students saying that they had fun, and they appreciate what landscape architecture is. Next, please. Looking ahead and looking around, hopefully we're looking at blended type of learning. With the current situation, I think the discussion topics would also broaden. And hopefully the growing appreciation for the GE course and landscape architecture in general would grow. So hopefully I could share also with the rest of my students in the future. Next, please. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Sir Fontanosa. I think we lost Ma'am Rachel. Let me just check. Tama ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Oo. Okay, let me just request the assistance of our secretariat. Steph, may I know kung sino yung next?
Ma'am, I think it's
Ma'am
Ma'am
si,
Lilibeth.
yes po, si Ma'am Lilibeth Salvador.
Okay, so on behalf
Morning.
of Ma'am Rachel, let's hear from Dr. Lilibeth Salvador. So she's a faculty member of the Marine Science Institute of UP Diliman. Ma'am Lilibeth, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I actually have a pre-recorded presentation for this, Steph, if you can play, and this will touch on our experiences in preparing MS1 for the remote learning. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My talk entitled Seeing the Oceans Amidst the Pandemic presents our strategies in teaching MS1 and bringing the oceans to our students who are confined to their homes. MS1 is focused on the oceans and the marine ecosystem as an integral part of life. As citizens of an archipelagic state, UP students should be familiar with the oceans, how it impacts our lives, the issues we face, and how we can find solutions for sustainable use and preservation of this resource. Pre-pandemic, we utilized museum and also beach trips for experiential learning. Now that we are in a lockdown, very few students would have the privilege of having an ocean view. It's also unsafe to assume that all UP students have been to the beach and immersed themselves. So when we turn to remote learning, all the faculty handling MS1 had a series of workshops and discussed how to implement the course. How can we bring the oceans and show the relevance to our students who are now confined to their homes? We were guided by the 3 R's: relationship, relevance, and realization. We start the class by asking our students how they relate to the oceans. Majority of the students say they love the ocean. but they realize they know so little about it. You can see here the work of my students in the last 2 semesters, and you can see that they relate the oceans to your typhoons, flooding, and also walang pasok. We follow this discussion with more relationships. Now, we'll look at the relationships among marine organisms and also the relationship of humans with marine organisms by utilizing different databases. While there are excellent materials on oceanography available, we do not want to flood our students with just an outsider view of the oceans. Rather, we want our students to see the state of the Philippine oceans. We utilize here documentaries and statistics that are focused on the Philippines. We let the students see different pictures of the Philippine oceans. In this case, by watching the documentary The Philippine Seas, they can see the Philippines oceans as a rich fisheries resources. And if the pandemic has also taught us one thing, it's that the issues related to the oceans do not stop. And in the last year, we've seen a lot of them. From the Dolomite Beach to territorial disputes to illegal trade and pollution, we discussed this in class, and so we integrate current information to our discussion to bring relevance to the topics. Lastly, we finish the course with realizations and looking at issues related to the ocean. We want this to really hit home. Again, we utilize available databases to get the point across. By utilizing this, our students can see a different picture of the Philippines. Now, we can see here that the Philippines is appearing as a hotspot for red tide. At the same time, if we look at this available material on the web, we can see here clearly that the Philippines will not only be losing a piece of paper to that trash bin with the ongoing territorial disputes, but we will be also losing our resources. At the end of the semester, we capped MS1 with realizations from the students. Here are the works of my students from last semester calling for change and believing in second chances to protect the ocean. Our activities during the remote learning for MS1 may not fully capture the oceans up close and personal, but we at the very least open the minds of UP students that we rely on the oceans, but it also needs our help. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lilibeth Salvador Reyes. So we'd like to call on our third panelist, Professor Edanjarlo Marquez. So Dr. Edanjarlo Marquez is a licensed geologist. He is a professor of geology at the University of the Philippines, Manila. His area of expertise includes micropaleontology, sedimentology, biostratigraphy, environmental geology, paleobiogeography, and petroleum geology. He has received several teaching and research awards, including UP Manila Gawad Chancellor Outstanding Teacher for 2017 and the National Research Council of the Philippines Achievement Award for 2011. He has been teaching GE and service courses in UP Manila for more than 15 years. He currently handles NASC 4, Science 10, and STS 1. Dr. Marquez, you have the floor.
Thank you po, Dr. Gotanco. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Natural Science 4 is the first and I guess at the moment in UP Manila, the only MST GE reconfigured. The course is being handled most of the time by myself and Assistant Professor Astrid Gaboglianan. Sometimes we seek the help of lecturers and co-faculty from our unit. Astrid and I prepared a course pack for the course. In the new normal, we use Canvas and Zoom as our platforms. In my class, all communications and submissions are all made in Canvas to avoid confusion and lost submissions. As a backgrounder for NATSI 4, NATSI 4 is a 3-unit course focusing on the interaction between humans and the physical environment with emphasis on resource management, combating pollution problems, coping with and mitigating geohazards, and environmental health. And these are the course learning outcomes. Please take note that these are all taken using environmental geology as the lens. It is divided in 3 modules. Shown here is the geohazard module. I want to direct your attention to the lecture and slide videos that we created. These videos are uploaded and listed in YouTube. Never in my wildest dreams I imagined myself as a vlogger. Mahirap pala. I learned how to create and edit vids as well as uploading in YouTube, courtesy of my relatively younger colleagues, particularly Astrid and Assistant Professor Shara Lim. Sabi ko nga, this is a case where a junior faculty is mentoring a senior faculty. Anyway, Astrid and I divided the topics to make the videos. Here are the requirements for the course. We decided to put more premium on the activities and final projects. All of this have rubrics, and the rubrics are uploaded in Canvas. Prior to the pandemic, we have fieldworks where students apply what they learned in class. Here are some examples of the thematic final projects submitted to us before the pandemic. Shown here is the plastic bottle boat project. These boats are tested and judged before being donated to flood-prone barangays. In this slide is the barrel car project. The cars are also tested and judged before being donated to Hospicio de San Jose and to the street kids around UP Manila. We also have a Facebook page which are used to upload the videos and pictures of our fieldworks and projects. It is also used to make announcements for our classes and fieldworks. For this pandemic, the final project takes the form of a 7-minute unlisted YouTube video where the student will show and explain the crude geohazard map they created, as well as the environmental problems observed in their locality. Please note that the schedule for the list of the activities, synchronous classes, submissions, quizzes, exams are done prior to the start of the semester. Shown here is a part of the calendar I prepared for the semester. In Canvas, we also have a section where students can post clarifications and questions regarding the lessons and activities. After 14 months in the pandemic and new normal, what do we notice in our setup? What are the challenges and perceived problems? The most common issues would be connectivity and health issues, both physical and mental. Not only the students, but also the parents have not fully adjusted to the online setup. The students keep on comparing face-to-face with online mode, say when they take the exam or quiz. Some parents would schedule activities or chores during synchronous sessions. In one instance, a student chatted that he was not able to respond to my question because his parents asked him to buy something during our class. The students also seem not yet ready to a student-centered mode. The students will still expect for a full lecture. They seldom ask during Q&A or clarificatory sessions. Most of the time, the question would be, kasama po ba sa exam itong part na to? The students also seem not aware that 12 units is considered a full load. Some of my students have loads up to 21 units. The students apparently have not realized that they need to devote at least 8 hours per week for a 3-unit course, as taught to us during one of the webinars. Cricket sound moments. We're all familiar with this. Even if the question is, how are you? Or do you have any questions? There will be no answers. You would call a student several times, no response. Siya din yung at the end of the class, na goodbye na kami, pero andun pa rin siya yung profile picture niya or avatar. When you ask after several minutes of waiting if he still has a question, bigla-bigla nila mag-leave. It seems that netiquette is also a problem. Communication or not following instruction problems. There would be students who would still email or submit assignments other than the designated email or submission bins. Some would seem having difficulty following instructions. Google experts. These are the students that when you ask a question, you will notice that they are typing, and when they answer, the answer would be exactly the first answer given by Google. Please note that some of the questions just solicit their opinion or stand on an issue. The Superman, Wonder Woman, or the Captain Barbell Darna complex. These are the students who feel the need to save their classmates. Okay lang sana siya, pero wag sana to the extreme. This happened in another GA class. The time was last semester when the students were demanding to end the semester. While I was giving a lecture to the student, while I was giving the lecture, the student raised the issue of ending the semester because according to the student, some of the classmates were having a hard time because of the pandemic and the calamities. I told the student that in case of ending the SEM, we need to wait for the decision of the admin who was meeting at the time. And the student should not worry about the classmates because I would deal with the situation. The ending? The student twisted my words. Good thing that I have a Zoom recording of that class. Students still prefer synchronous classes with full lecture, not Q&A or clarification sessions. Some remark that they wish to have taken NATSI 4 face-to-face, as shown in some of the snippets of the reaction to the course. Regarding the comments of G lang yan, we normally hear this word, we normally hear this toward the end of the semester when the students are already cramming. The students also prioritize their major subjects over GE. Appreciation lang yan. Alam naman natin na hindi lang siya appreciation course. Beyond that na siya. Look at the course descriptions and learning outcomes. On the bright side, looking at some of the comments, Asjad and I somehow feel validated that we are doing the something right in the handling of the course. For the last 3 semesters, very few students have utilized this section in Canvas. Even with constant reminder and encouragement, although some send an email if they have question or clarification. Based on the number of views, not all students are viewing the videos. Some same case with the required reading materials, even if they were given in advance. However, those who view the videos have this to say. I enjoyed every one of them, especially the energy you both show in the videos. They enjoyed the synchronous and asynchronous session, particularly yung creative videos. I greatly appreciate the videos you put up to every module. It was something new for me. They also recognize the effort that we put into coming up with the videos and the PowerPoints, and they said that these are very creative and really helpful. On a personal note, may I request, if this is possible, that we schedule important activities like this, or any activities for that matter in advance, so that we can include them when we plan for the semester. Medyo mahirap po kasi mag-adjust bigla-bigla, and this would appear to our students as many activities, assignments, or meetings being crammed in a short period of time. Regarding the memos reminders seen by the students, for example, the memo reminding the faculty to be compassionate, considerate, and flexible. Repetitive reminders might be conditioning the student to think that the faculty is uncompassionate, inconsiderate, and inflexible. While having a discussion with someone, we came to agree that being compassionate, considerate, and flexible doesn't mean that they should be at the expense of our ability to exercise fairness in class and lowering the established standards and rigor of the course. Otherwise, I am wondering what types of future graduates and citizens are we going to produce for the future. Maraming salamat po, and may the force of the earth be with you.
Thank you, Professor Marquez. So that was a very interesting perspective, more on the perspective of student challenges. And I'm sure many in the audience can relate to your many anecdotes about the different categories of student responses and behaviors. And indeed, I think it's really a challenge, for faculty and for teachers to really walk the fine line, to balance being compassionate and considerate and being flexible, as far as our instruction goes, while struggling, to ensure that our students get the best education and mode of instruction that we can offer. So thank you for your sharing. So I'd like to call on next Professor Leopoldo de Silva. Professor De Silva, good morning, is a professorial lecturer with the UP National Institute of Geological Sciences, where he got his Bachelor of Science degree in geology. He earned his PhD in geosciences from Tsukuba University, and he specializes in micropaleontology and paleoceanography. So, Dr. De Silva, you have the floor.
Yes, my presentation is pre-recorded, so if you can play my presentation, please. Good morning. Let me reintroduce the GE course that the National Institute of Geological Sciences has been offering. Geology 1 are dynamic Earth. It is topical in nature and it includes all of these broad topics. Now, the topics were chosen because we felt they were and still are current and relevant. Now, geology is an applied science, and therefore our approach has always been multidisciplinary, at least with respect to science. However, there is room for more disciplines: climate change, geologic hazards, and resources of social, psychosocial, and economic dimension. Now, in terms of course pack preparation, there's not much to discuss except that we follow the playbook prescribed by UP. This includes the redesign of the syllabus. We had to cut down on topics to take into account the shorter semester. We also included detailed course outline and weekly study guides, which proved to be very useful. At least for this second semester, we were able to incorporate the reading breaks. Now, this is important because it allowed the students and the teacher to be always on the same page. Now, with respect to content, it was provided in the form of narrated PowerPoint presentations, which were converted to video, and guided reading modules, supplementary videos, which were all uh, uploaded in Oobleck. Now, the advantage of having pre-recorded the lectures and having this included in the course outline with the schedule is that it freed the teacher from always trying to deliver the content. It allowed the teachers during synchronous meetings to expand on these topics and, if possible, relate them to current events or recent discoveries. Now, in terms of class management, some good practices: anticipating delay in the access to the course pack through Oobleck during the beginning of the semester. A 2-week worth of content was emailed to the students. Now, this is particularly relevant during the first semester when we have lots of incoming freshmen who may not have immediate access to Oobleck. Now, this 2-week buffer, 2 weeks worth of content, allowed the students to be able to proceed with the course even without access to Oobleck. I'm a big believer of Oobleck, but we should always be prepared for contingencies. We conducted once a week synchronous meetings. Now, why once a week? This is actually a choice made by the students. My reading is that the students still appreciate having to interact with the teacher and their fellow students. Now, due dates for requirements were set in Oobleck, but not cut-off dates. So in short, the deadlines were all aspirational. The students were allowed to submit the requirements till the end of the semester. What is good with UBLE is that it constantly sends messages reminding the students that they need to submit requirements. And I think this is important. We need to follow up immediately on students with deficiencies, especially in this time of pandemic. We need to be able to uh, determine the personal circumstances of the students, offer help if we can, and also this will prevent misunderstanding later on at the end of the semester when we need to submit their grades. Now, promoting inclusivity. The core of the subject remains to be science, geology, but we try to incorporate topics, elements from other disciplines. We need to be able to appeal to non-science majors. It is a GE course after all. Now, for example, when I introduced the topic of the systems approach to the study of geology, I usually start as a segue by showing students a series of photographs of Eastern and Western paintings. I would then ask the students if they are able to differentiate between Eastern art and philosophy versus Western art and philosophy. Now, this will catch the attention of students from the fine arts, philosophy, and humanities. In that way, I'm able to draw students from other disciplines to contribute to the discussion. And this is something which I learned from humanities. Like Eastern art and philosophy, the systems approach to the study of the earth focuses on the whole rather than the parts. We also need to take advantage of diversity and students' disciplinary strengths. Pre-pandemic, when it was easier for students to collaborate, I would group students according to related fields and assign topics for reporting. For example, I would pose this problem to students from education and related disciplines. Now that you know the science behind geologic hazards, how do we more effectively communicate these hazards to the people? In this way, I feel that they are able to utilize what they've learned from their discipline and apply it to a topic such as geologic hazards. We also need to expose students to different points of view to broaden their perspective. One of the highlights of my Asian civilization subjects years ago when our, was when our professor invited a Buddhist monk to our class. Now, to a very young mind, I found this experience profoundly interesting. It broadened my perspective. I'm not suggesting that we all invite a Buddhist monk, but I think it is a good idea if we are able to expose our students to people with different perspectives. And then finally, in teaching Geology 1, I try to draw inspiration from my experience from my past GE classes. Now, if our students are able to apply their experience in GE to their profession and to life in general, then perhaps we are fulfilling some of the objectives of GE education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor De Silva, for your sharing, focusing also touching on the themes of the relevance now of GE and also the important aspect of inclusivity. Um, so I'd like to call on our last panelist. So it's a pleasure to have Professor Aurora Odette Mendoza from Mampichi. So she has been teaching in UP at the undergraduate and graduate levels for more than 4 decades. Wow. Her research and extension work are based on her expertise in perception information processing models in conjunction with organizational psychology. Her research is largely applied and or multidisciplinary, participating in research programs with VSBA and Soler on the meaning of work and productivity, with computer science and EEE on training programs for the semiconductor industry, with architecture on the meaning of houses, and AIT, CSWCD, and CPAG and Soler on emerging tourism destinations, among others. He has also served the university in the development of the Student Code of Conduct under the OVCSA and the new SET instrument under the OVPAA, and shifting the operations of the Office of Admissions to online modes for better access to education, such as the UPCAT Online Reviewer, UPCAT Online Applications, and UPCAT Online Results Confirmation Portal, in collaboration with ITDC, where she served as previously as director of that office. So good morning, Ma'am Pichi, you have the floor. Ma'am, nakamute pa po kayo.
So good morning to everyone. I'm here on behalf of the DRMAPS faculty. You will see that there are quite a bundle of us. We have Professor Datuin from Art Studies, myself from Psychology, Professor Pacheco, who is a structural engineer, Lenny Kerr, who is director of the Education Technology Unit of the Education College, and Doy Rosete from Fine Arts, previous dean of that college, and our beloved Professor Mark Zarco, who is a geotechnical engineer. You can see we are a motley of faculty, and we may be smiling here, but it's not always the case. It's hard to work with the group, but it's also very satisfying. Next slide, please. Okay, so many of you may be curious as to what DRMAPS is. I point out its three main features. The focus of the course is for students to understand the basic principles and practices of disaster risk reduction under the larger disaster risk reduction management framework. This is in accord with the Sendai framework's first priority and its call for action, that is the understanding the concept of disaster risk. Our second feature is that we work together throughout the course as a team, using a general approach which we call multiple disciplinarity. Sometimes we are multidisciplinary. We share knowledge with our students coming from our different disciplines, and these are independent of each other. Sometimes we are interdisciplinary, where our learning resources are combinations or a sharing of knowledge where we interact actually with each other, in terms of the disciplinary knowledge. And finally, we also shift to transdisciplinary modes, which are more integrative and following organizational psychology's open systems view, it is very holistic in nature. Of course, from the title of the course, our goal is disaster risk reduction through mitigation, adaptation, and preparedness strategies. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so we have an emphasis, as I mentioned, on mitigation, adaptation, and preparedness strategies. But before that, we need to enable our students to be comfortable being in such a large class. This semester, we have 105 students, which we have grouped into 6 sections, one under each of the 6 faculty members for administrative purposes. However, we normally, pre-pandemic times, meet them as a whole team and as a whole large class. But during those pre-pandemic times, we had the luxury of group exercises which were face-to-face, including role-playing and psychodrama. Role-playing in particular is a very effective exercise for allowing members of the group to put themselves in the place of a particular disaster, no? Putting into an illustration, no? Using their bodies, what the hazard is like in terms of its characteristics, and at the same time, how people or the community, no, in which this particular hazard occurs, will be, how these people will be responding. Okay, so this group exercises can involve a simple sharing of different points of view. For example, we can have a decision-making task, which will allow them to uncover biases and stereotypes, no? Or it can be a creative task, as you can see here, so that they can learn about not just adding to enrich, no, someone's particular idea, but also to learn how to negotiate and to collaborate. So for much of our group work, we do not utilize peer evaluation. However, because this tends to highlight their individuality, we choose to evaluate their group experience. That is, we ask them about how it was like to work as a group, asking about the level of cooperation or the level of influence of specific members of the group. But we also expect them to share with us how frustrated they were or how satisfied they were with the group work. So in that sense, we do not ask for peers to evaluate other peers, because here we expect their identity will be as a group and not as individual members of the group. Now, next slide, please. We go to the group exercises during the pandemic. They're not so different in purpose. We still take a close look at their dynamics, and we also would like them to know about hazards and risk assessment, no? But they are designed for students to end up, instead of a case study, with a case study proposal. So we have mini exercises that eventually lead to the final case study proposal. An example of a mini exercise is the Jack and Jill case, no? Which sort of injects some kind of humor in the case study. Jack and Jill, as you know, is a nursery rhyme which ends up in a disaster with Jack falling down and Jill tumbling after. So we asked them to use online sources to search for relevant information about the risk factors that led to Jack falling down, and why did Jill tumble after instead of just falling down, no? And then they create risk assessment methods to examine the details of the risk factors that are useful for disaster risk reduction. So to enable our students to do this, of course, it's essential that their group dynamics are not problematic. And it's also essential that they are able to select different modes of communication which will be accessible for all members. So here we include the use of FB Messenger, Discord, email, video chats, Viber, Google Meet, or even small Zoom meetings among themselves. No? So early on in the semester, our exercises are relatively simple, but they get more and more complicated as we move towards the end of the semester. Next slide, please. Okay, now it's not just the students who engage in group work. DRMAPS faculty also engage in group work, no? In order to develop lectures, exercises, and assessments. You can see here some samples of our group work. On the left side is a flood assessment exercise that asks students, after they have learned about what flood is like and what hydrometeorological factors caused it, no, they are asked to assess the risk of flooding, but this is not just from an objective point of view, but it also asks them to estimate their perceived risk, no? Using valid psychometric measures which distinguish between, for example, unknown risk and dreadful risk. In this other slide, you can see how the inputs from the arts, no, make their case studies more elaborate, no, because they have exercises. This is in tandem, no, Professor Datuin with Professor Zarco, how art can help you pay attention to your environment. And in the last slide, we give you an example of how also something very technical as buildings, as structures, no, can be infused with cultural, aesthetic, and even philosophical aspects. Next slide, please. Okay, so we follow multidisciplinary exercises with interdisciplinary exercises and end up with transdisciplinary projects. This is an example of how to communicate or illustrate a mind map, no, for 3 different perspectives. This is courtesy of Dean Doi, whose expertise is in visual communication. So mind maps are effective demonstrations how a particular perspective is understood. For example, a social political perspective of a case, or an eco-critical perspective of a case, or a psychosocial perspective of a particular case. At the end of the semester, they're asked to integrate these particular perspectives, no, to produce concept maps, which are illustrations not just of a single concept, but relationships between different perspectives. Next slide, please. Okay, here I present to you, one of those integrated risk assessment models which take a look at both person variables, for example, introducing a concept of acceptable risk, which is not very popular in DRRM courses. No, it is the fact that our brains are hardwired to accept risk. It is not just perceived risk, which determines whether we will adjust our behavior to be more cautious, no, but it is also our acceptable risk levels. So both acceptable and perceived risk are compared with each other. If acceptable risk is higher than perceived risk, which may already be very high, a person will still behave in a risky manner because it's acceptable for him to engage in risk. We see here also the effects of the social environment, norms, culture, and just having, let's say, in your company, persons with disabilities, pregnant females, or children, no? Which will make us adjust our behavior also accordingly. And here we have the role of the physical environment, which is responsible for warning systems, which are communicated to individuals or to communities. So this is an example of the transdisciplinarity in the course. So that's all. Thank you. Next slide, please, for our ending. So this is the DRMAPS team. Thank you very much. You can see here we also role play specific characters. No? Our roles in the team in mentoring our students vary based on these particular roles that we have assigned to ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ma'am Pichi. So that was an excellent demonstration of interdisciplinarity, where we have many faculty from very diverse fields coming together into craft the DRMAPS GE course. So I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their experiences. So for now, we move on to the question and answer or the open forum portion of our session. No? So this is where we'll have our kwentuhan, and hopefully we'll have an engaging one. So right now we have we received 5 questions from the audience. So I'll for the first, so this doesn't come in any particular order, but I took the liberty of rearranging. So for the first question, this one is addressed to all the panelists, no? And this came from Professor Benito Pacheco of UP Diliman. So he asked, how does each GE course involve faculty members from different departments? So we could probably go quickly around the screen, no? Not around the table for your answers to this question. So who would like to go first?
Since since Dr. Pacheco is a member of our team, I will allow the other panelists to speak their mind on this matter.
Sino pong gustong mauna?
Yeah, hi, Rachel. Yeah. So for Marine Science 1, Oceans and Us, there's currently no involvement from faculty from other institute, but the interdisciplinarity is across the different fields studying of marine science, specifically biological oceanography, the physical sciences, as well as the biotechnology aspect. And so that is something that is being considered. So currently, right now, we have ongoing engagements with the College of Social Work on our work on red tide, harmful algal bloom, as well as on the territorial disputes with people from the College of Law.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lilibeth, yes,
yes,
Architect Fontanoza.
Yeah, Ma'am Rachel. Okay. Actually, well, also with the mix of our students, in LA1, we already show them some slides that landscape architects work collaboratively with other professional disciplines. So nandun na yung mga architects. We also have architecture students taking LA1, and then we also have geology students also. So that's also part of the collaborative. So parang somehow that early we're trying to show them that the profession is a collaborative output. But when it comes to the faculty of other professions, I think it also helps our students when we show them or we invite them to join the webinars that the college has been preparing. We get speakers from, well, mostly we tie it up with landscape architecture, but we also get speakers from different fields. So just recently we have urban forestry as topic. So, and then we just tie it up with how landscape architecture is part of that. And those topics are part of landscape architecture in return. So collaboratively, we do that. Also with the LA1 course pack, before we actually started, we were able to discuss with other professors also in the college. So to make it fortified for this remote environment.
Thank you, Architect Fontanoza. May we hear from Dr. De Silva or Dr. Marquez?
Okay, I'll start. As I've said, I think we would benefit from a lot of perspectives. Now, for Geology 1, the best we can do probably is to get people as guest speakers. And it will take a lot of coordination because like we have 10 classes, we cannot ask the speaker to speak for each of these classes. So probably arrange for a common time so that all of the classes can participate.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Dr. Marquez?
Na-mention ko din before dun sa presentation ko that NATSCI 4 is viewed in the lens of environmental geology. So basically, the course would be answering what, where, why, how these things happen in the lens of environmental geology. Pero what we do is that we discuss certain things that several disciplines would be contributing doon sa topic. Last semester, when we had the Manila Bay Forum, I invited my students in NATSCI 4 to watch yung forum so they would understand yung issue as well as yung materials involved in the Dolomite project in Manila Bay. Tapos we also during fieldworks, we also invite faculty from other disciplines such as chemistry or math. Meron din silang input during the fieldwork. And physics, I see.
Thank you, Dr. Marquez. No, so you mentioned just that the Manila Bay Forum, and I think everyone on the panel has their field in terms of their fields of expertise, can have their views on that aspect, from obviously the geologists, the marine scientists, architects, landscape architects, and yung DRMAPS, yung resilience and risk assessment. So it's an excellent example of how a single topic or a single theme is really multidisciplinary, or it's not just looking at it from the lens of a few fields, and it's also a good example to our students to highlight the inclusivity. Yes. Yes, before I call on Ma'am Pichi, can I call on Architect Fortanosa? Yes, you're going to say.
Go ahead. Sorry, just to add lang, even that particular topic of the Dolomite, one session I asked my students, any topic that they wanted to discuss, they were the ones who brought it up. So it wasn't me. So they somehow they know the topic, they have an idea of what's going on, and it's good that they're up to date in that sense. So I think it's up to us as professors, all of us here, or even as maybe as someone who is more familiar with the topic, then we can share what our take on the subject. But it was a good experience for us because they were the ones who brought it up, and actually I did not, so it was a good experience for me.
Thank you, Architect. So may I call on Ma'am Pichi?
Yep. Well, it's starting from or taking on from what Architect Fontanosa mentioned. It's really important to take a look at what will be common among a very diverse group of students. Because we all know that the GE course is made up of students that come from different disciplinary programs. And they each have their expectations. They all have their implicit stereotypes about it. And sometimes when we first hold class, they are surprised to find people from fine arts or art studies or psychology. And they say, oh, they thought it's all about engineering, and how that figures in disaster risk reduction. So we always start our exercises with something that is common to all, like a nursery rhyme. They had so much fun in that particular exercise. They actually found in the internet a town, and I think in England, which they considered a mining community that led to Jack falling down. So that was very creative. But we also have, aside from these group exercises, individual exercises. For example, we ask them to assess each of their household bubbles in relation to this COVID-19. So what are their exposures, vulnerabilities, capacities, and so on. And for them, being able to apply it from their personal experience, something very worthy of an exercise. So, yep.
Thank you, Ma'am Pichi, for sharing. So we've gone around the screen for the 5 panelists. So The second question now is, I guess it also relates to, pertains to everyone, but it's a more general question regarding modules related to online learning. So this was asked by Professor Cleto Nanyola of UP Diliman. Sorry, UP Mindanao. I guess it was more of asking about updates on modules related to online learning. I know many of most of you have already shared how you transitioned your course materials now to online learning, but perhaps maybe if there's anything that you haven't touched on your presentations that you would like to share at this point.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am Rachel.
Telephone again.
All right. Actually, ma'am, with regards to the courses or the modules, we had to shorten certain modules since I think for the first semester especially, we were given I think 14 weeks for that semester. So it actually was, well, on one end it was easy on our end because being exposed to the students during lectures would be shortened, but the challenge is how to make it concise enough that you're able to discuss the important parts also. So we had to merge certain topics. Another would be, of course, there's that issue on the access to certain references. I always joke around my students that in the College of Architecture we have, for example, this year is 2021. I would joke that our references are like 5 years ahead. So I would always joke that we have 2026 references already, something like that. So, but that's a joke that I do it in my class. So, with that being said, there are the references, the physical books, they don't have access to that anymore. So on our end, I think it was also challenging of finding certain references, that
Yeah.
they can use and they can access, and and not bridging that issue with what's that, yung access, yung something
Open
like that.
access.
Yeah, open access, ma'am, correct. So nandun din yung parang that's also back and forth, and then going online in YouTube and supplementary references, video references, that's also a challenge. And again, yung the updates, the webinars, what topics are, can be shared to the general public, to our students in GE. So again, yun yung mga challenges na I think we did with the courses.
Thank you, Architect Fontanoza. Yes, Lilibeth?
Yeah, I'll add to that and touch on updates, what Franklin said on the course content as well as the update. So for MS1, I think what we did for the modules now is to constantly update it. So when we started in the first semester, so we had the contents of the module arranged. And then by the start of the second semester, we again discuss among ourselves what worked and what did not work. How can we streamline the most important topics, given now that the semester is shortened? So which among the topics do we put more emphasis on? And how can we improve better the learning of the students? Okay, so for these modules for MS1, unlike the experience of Franklin with regards to the references, we made it a point that all the materials to be used by the students are provided to them. So aside from the actual course pack itself, all the videos, lectures are there. So the students can have equal access to the materials. Okay, so right now, again, we're ending the semester, and before, again, the start of the first semester, and maybe likely that we will still be on a remote learning mode, we'll again revisit the content of the module so that we make sure that it's up to date, it's relevant, and we put emphasis on the important aspects.
Thank you, Lilibeth. No? Yes, Professor De Silva.
Yes, in our course packs, we included the standalone reading modules. They were really designed for students who do not have access to the internet or have learning gadgets. But it turns out most of the students have access to the internet. So now these reading modules are really supplementary.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Anyone else care to share? Yes, Professor Marquez.
Same halos basically we reviewed yung first semester modules namin, and then we recheck kung ano yung nag-work at hindi. Tapos we revise some of the exercises para mas madali. In terms of material, so yun, bukod sa meron kaming video lectures o kaya slide lectures, we also provided yung possible references or reading materials that they can use. So, yun nga lang, di ba, merong mga copyright issues. Beforehand, actually, sumulat kami dun sa mga authors, tapos dun sa mga publishers, if we can use certain portions of their book. Unfortunately, hindi lahat sumasagot o kaya hindi pumapayag. So, siguro yun din yung dapat tignan natin na kung merong maitutulong sa atin yung admin para mas madali nating makuha yung mga materials na to.
Thank you, Professor Marquez. No, so thank you for sharing that. It's, I think, a concern of most of the faculty, lalo na when our materials are actually open for sharing, di ba, for our students. So lalo na once you put it out there, right, nandun na yun, and anyone can access it. So yes, Ma'am Pichi.
Well, for me, I think it really brings out this concept of agility, for organizational psychology and organizations. We now see that those organizations that are agile are the ones that will survive. Interestingly, for us faculty, we have morphed into what we call a quick response team. No? Dapat kailangan you are able immediately to respond to something, because OVPA will not wait for a month before implementation of a change. No, they will give you a memo a week before maybe, and then you have to do it right away. But that's the way things are. The virus does not say, ay, kailangan dumaan sa proseso yung mga ganyan na memo. Hindi. We have to do it, and that's what we're doing. And I think one of our best strategies as a team is that we have our own works, that do not require intellectual property rights and so on. So because you're a big team, you can infuse your own work without being afraid of stepping on intellectual property rights of others. So this is when it's best to use our own research work or our own community work, and infuse that in our classes.
Yes, thank you, Ma'am Pichi. So that's a very interesting perspective, especially now, with this pandemic, everyone was really caught flat-footed, di ba?
Yes.
Hindi naman talaga natin inaasahan, and no one was really, I think, preparing. I don't know if anyone was really preparing for having their courses delivered completely, all of a sudden, completely online. So it's good that you mentioned the word, agility, or yung being able to quickly adapt to a situation. Yes, Franklin?
Yeah, Ma'am Rachel, just to add lang, I also had this challenge of selecting which online platform to use. I know that I've been attending other sessions already, and they've mentioned about the TikTok, etc. So I think that's so depende, I think, on the prof. I think it's on the prof also. Personally, I opted not to go towards that direction. I wanted them to feel that TikTok is, a way to let loose. So not really related to anything academic. So that's my personal choice also. So even on Facebook, I opted not to, go on Facebook. I try to limit our conversations mainly on through Google Classroom and email. But I made sure that I keep stressing that my email is always open. So there is one student who messaged me through email because she's having anxiety. So I think I'm able to reach out to them through my email. It's just that yun lang, kailangan lang nag-check ka ng email occasionally. But for those platforms, I opted not to. I want them to think that TikTok is something, very loose and very fun, and not think of my face when they do that. So, but again, I think it's a case-to-case basis. So, but for me, I opted not to. Also, there are some students, I think, who also mentioned that, being exposed to the online setup and different courses also, just not us, also their major. So, may kanya-kanya rin silang piniling platform. So, parang if I add, another platform, baka parang dumagdag lang ako sa stress. So, yun. So that's what I did with LA.
Thank you, Franklin. No? So I think Lilibeth, yes, you were raising
Yes.
your hand.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just add to the point of Ma'am Peachy regarding using our own articles to circumvent the problem of yung sa IPR. Well, aside from that, I think there are a lot of very good open access database that the students can use. And it shows relational, not just, for example, data for the Philippines, but also you can compare the Philippines across the world. And I think using those available open access databases was very useful for MS1. So more or less you can put nasaan bang Pilipinas dito, and you kind of have put a more relevant picture. Where are you in the bigger picture, and where is the Philippines on its own? So it's another aspect how we can more or less help our students with access to materials.
Yes. Thank you for sharing, Lilibeth. I think that's a very important point, kasi one of the things that we also try to convey with regard to GE education, I think, aside from being well-rounded, having the students exposed to a well-rounded education, is the identity, right? So where is the student as a Filipino, I guess, in this big global picture. So I think that's very important to communicate to our students. Okay, so yes, Prof. Marquez.
Yung NATSI 4 po is environmental geology. So it's application of the principles of geology. Di ba, ang alam po natin is that they have taken earth science in their high school, tsaka yung DRM, meron sila sa high school. So although parang syempre high school level, it turned out then na not all of them actually ay kinukuha talaga yung earth science. So pag nagsimula ka actually, if giving them materials, articles, merong mga comments din yung mga estudyante na some of the things na binabasa nila, hindi nila naintindihan. So you still have to repeat and recalibrate para standardize din yung alam nila. Medyo mahirap kasi na I think in one GE merong ganun na comment na we gave them articles pero hindi nila masyadong maintindihan yung mga terms do sa article. Kasi nga, di ba, this is GE, so supposed to be dapat mas maintindihan nila yung mga bagay-bagay. And if yung application hindi nila naintindihan yung principles, yung concepts, medyo kailangan nila talaga nung basic materials.
Thank you, Professor Marquez. Okay, so we'll move on. We still have 3 more questions, but 2 of these are medyo specific, no? So the first one is for Architect Franklin, no? This one is from Raymond Macapagal. He asks, have you tried discussing pandemic-driven landscape issues like plantita-induced plant poaching and urban agriculture?
Okay, thank you for the question. All right, actually, I saw it in the chat. So, but anyway, I was supposed to answer. Actually, the issue on the the story about that plantito plantita. Actually, again, it also came from our students, from my students. So there was this one session kasi yung oras namin medyo tanghali. So I even saw the mom in the background. So parang she even said she waved hi ganyan. So and she was actually holding a plant. So parang okay, so I guess that's she's moving plants around. So and then I had to ask the student parang who's plantita plantito. So ganyan, something like that. Another faculty even mentioned that there are some LA1 students who took LA1 because they became more exposed to being plantito plantita. So I would like to believe that this is just not a fad. I hope that will go away after the pandemic. But I think ultimately we wanted to show the benefits of having plants around. Mental health wise, when you have when you're working, I think it's good to see something natural around you, which is the closest is having a plant beside you. So I hope that also in the students, from the students perspective, they also see it as an advantage, being around plants. But again, we tell them to be cautious of which plant to bring home. We've always been promoting sourcing out native plants, endemic, correct, ma'am? So we don't want them bringing exotic plants because mamaya may sakit, etc. and all. So again, din yung habitat, natuturo na din yan because geology, etc. So may topics about that. Now, yung topics on I think on urban agriculture, I think na-mention natin also in that question was that pumapasok din yung buzzword ng sustainability as we move towards the contemporary landscape. So, nandiyan na yung mga urban areas, urban challenges, food, urban agriculture, food scarcity, etc. So, again, papasok din yung issue ng plantita. Again, asking them, why are you selecting these plants? What do you use them for? Is it something to look at, or do you want them, to bear fruit, or to para yung sile ganyan, or maisama sa pagluluto ni mommy or ni daddy, something like that. So again, this opens up conversation in class. Actually, may comment ako in my SET na masyado daw good vibes yung class ko. I'm sorry, but I took it positively. So, but one mentioned that masyado daw good vibes yung class ko. Parang we keep on talking and talking and talking. So I think that's also a good way, to distress myself also. So that's why I really enjoy teaching GE. So parang, very relaxed kasi ang GE compared to the majors. So I think I hope, I feel the same, the others feel the same way also.
Thank you, Franklin, for your perspective. So our next question is for the marine science. They ask what were the challenges faced in this time of pandemic, specifically challenges faced not just by students but by faculty as well. So Lilibeth?
Yeah, I think for MS1, because MS1 is more, I would say the goal of MS1 is more than just being a GE course for them to get out of the university. I think for MS1, our ultimate goal is really to create your UP students as stewards of the ocean. They have to understand the ocean. They have to appreciate the oceans, right? Because it has a very important aspect to us. And so, siguro in terms of the difficulty, it would be, or the challenge would be, one, again, I'll touch on the engagement in the short term, because you want the students to be involved and be active learners. And in the long term, Professor Marquez mentioned it, right? Yung quality of students that we will get. So I think for MS1, we want also the challenges there also for them that they appreciate. So during the course of the semester, they are active learners. And then after the semester, after they took your G course, what you want them to be would take the lessons with them and actually be stewards for this. And I think also for MS1, everyone is at home, right? And a lot of our students, even the teachers, would be very far from the ocean. And so one of the aspects that we actually want to or break would be, if I am far from the ocean, then I'm not harming it, right? And the notion that the ocean is far away from me has is not relevant to my well-being or myself. So I think for the pandemic, breaking those notions is also a challenge. Because even if we are now just sitting here, our activities on land actually impacts the oceans that may be far away from us. At the same time, we are here now, we're breathing, and actually what we're breathing is actually coming from the ocean. So the relationship is still there. And I think sustaining that during the semester for active learning and after the semester is over, I think those are our main challenges.
Thank you, Lilibeth. No, I think if I may intervene with just one word, that would be best described by isolation, right? So yung challenge of students being locked in, everyone being locked in and isolated, and hopefully that does not translate to an idea that you're alone and you have no connection to the outside world, because all our these MSTGE subjects really rely on students to actively, hopefully, experience or interact with the natural environment or the built environment. And siguro also, probably, if I may add, the challenges faced by faculty as well is also isolation. No, so it's difficult to try to engage with how do you engage across the screen, like what we're doing right now. But this is our new normal. We don't know until when this is going to be, but everyone's learning to navigate how to try to feel less isolated in a very isolating environment. No, so I think that's a good segue to the last question, and I specifically kept this question for last because this is what I would call the Miss Universe question. This is for anyone and all. If you could give yourself advice about the remote learning experience a month before the pandemic started, what would that be? Diba? Miss Universe. What would that be?
A month before?
Or I guess
Does it have to be
sometime
a month
before
before?
a very specific time frame, or anytime before this pre-pandemic.
Well, you always move towards risk reduction, di ba? And kami actually, when we focus on our modules and change them, we always think about risk reduction. And I'm not saying that in terms of disaster risk, because every behavior that we have is risk related. So what you do is to mitigate that risk. A month before, you already sort of prepare for, is OVPA going to cut the semester again? And then, you already prepare for that. So even like the modules we prepare, a lot of them are modular. So pwede mong tear off this part for in case, there's less time, or you add another part. You can even string certain modules together because we work as a tandem. And I think that's the beauty of a really multidisciplinary team teaching GE, because you can see it with not just your wide open eyes, but the next faculty member to you is also wide eyes open, and you sort of cut all the, you can manage to think of almost everything.
Thank you, Ma'am Pichi. Yes, Franklin?
Okay, siguro just to add to what PJ mentioned. Actually, what I'm thinking now is what advice I will give myself. I could have given myself a month earlier, before the pandemic, is actually go out.
Risky yan.
The appreciation for the open space is, on a different level. And I'm in the disaster risk management, geology, the oceans. They're all part of being outdoors. So I wish I could have been more appreciative. I could have been breathing more natural air, spending more time with my family at not in Manila, something like that. So, and after the pandemic, the way we navigate our open spaces would be very different. How we tread and relate to people would be different. And the design of these spaces would also be different. So, I think that's also a good comparison. What happened before the pandemic and after the pandemic, how we appreciate our open spaces. And I do believe that we would be more appreciative of the open spaces once this is over.
I'll
Yes,
add to
Lil,
the
and
ano,
then
to
Prof.
the
Marquez.
yeah, I'll add to what Franklin said. I was thinking maybe 1 month before the pandemic, I should have taken an Airbnb, and then I could like in a beachside resort, and I could have taught the course MS1 remotely from ocean setting, right? And not just use the Zoom background where you have the ocean behind you. So, but kidding aside, I think 1 month before the pandemic, I should have said, don't cram. So I think, having a regular schedule, I think, and addressing things earlier is better, given that, the circumstances, as Ma'am Pichi said, risk reduction. So if your things are not crammed, then your risk would be lower, and you have more leeway to adjust. So with that, I thank you, since it's a Miss Universe question.
Thank you, Lil. Professor Marquez.
Siguro sa akin, kung alam ko lang na ganito yung mangyayari, I should have enjoyed myself more. Okay, nag-relax din ako. And if you're a fan of Harry Potter, I should have bought a pensive. So para hindi lahat ay napupuno. So I can keep on deleting memories, ideas, etc. Kasi minsan because of isolation, diba, you tend to think a lot. So, siguro. I thank you.
Thank you. Our candidate
So-
from GEO1.
Okay, so I think none of us expected this pandemic to last this long. So the preparations we did, they were all rushed. I would have done a better job making the PowerPoint presentations because it's not that engaging. I would have loved that the PowerPoint presentations were in a classroom setting. And I think we will be able to use these materials even outside the pandemic.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Da Silva. No? So I think we already asked all the questions posed to us by the audience. No? And actually, this is particularly unnerving because there's 6 of us here having this conversation. But in the participants button, it says there are 61 other people in the room. So that we don't hear from, no, not even. This is our environment now, no. So there's other people in the room that we don't hear from. No noises, no sounds, but they know that we know they're there, and hopefully that they listen to all your perspectives and picked up some insight, no. So we're missing the dynamic portion of real time discussion simply because the courses, the platform, the environment we have available to us right now limits our interaction. I think there's one more question that came in. Can I ask the secretariat if we can still ask this question quickly? Okay lang po kasi we're
Go
over
ahead,
time.
Ma'am Rachel,
Okay.
mabilis lang.
Okay, so
Thank
mabilis
you.
lang daw. So is there a possibility of having these courses be converted into MOOCs to make them more resilient? MOOCs is the massive open online courses, right? Format. So anyone care to give feedback on that?
Yes,
Lil?
I'll see for MS1. So that's something that we're looking at in the future together with the university. So hopefully, I mean, that's really our goal for MS1 is to bring it to a lot more students. Again, with the goal that they become stewards of these resources for the Philippines. So definitely we'll try to make it available to more students.
Anyone else? I think this question came from Ma'am Vanji.
Or Pat na rin to.
Welcome question yan, but didn't come from me.
May disclaimer. Anyone?
So
Yes, Professor De Silva.
with respect to Geology 1, it will take a lot of work because geology is very descriptive. We use a lot of illustrations, which we source from other authors. So if we really want to open up Geology 1, we need to redraw or make our own illustrations, and it will take a lot of time.
Thank you, Professor De Silva. Anyone else? Yes, Franklin?
Yeah, actually, ma'am, I'm not too familiar with the platform. But I think, since we really want to reach out to a lot of people and a lot of disciplines, I think that would be all right. But I do agree with Professor De Silva that it will take quite some time, and really putting time and effort in making sure that what we put out there would be very useful. But I think for the LA1 also, we started already with the webinars. I think the webinars that the college has been providing is actually open to the public. So that's one way for now, where we can share learnings. We also had that topic about the Dolomite. So we have other experts joining us also. Maybe in the future, in the next semesters, we could do that again. I mean, all the other professors here, maybe you could join us also through that platform. And the next step would be the move. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think we need
I'm
a
teaching,
lot
yes.
of technical assistance for that. No? But at the moment, for Dr. Maps, we're still looking for other faculty who would be interested in joining the team, no? Or creating new teams also for Dr. Maps. That's where we are now.
Yes, Professor Marquez.
We're not safe for with regards to some pictures, we've already taken some photos kasi nakapagsulat kami ng libro before, so we've taken a lot of photos of, for example, rocks and minerals and structures. Pero siguro with respect to my YouTube videos, medyo nahihiya pa ako kasi hindi ako masyado pang sanay. Siguro kapag meron na akong magandang microphone, tsaka mga ilaw, tsaka mga special effects, siguro one day. Pero for now, siguro yung sa mga students ko na lang muna.
Okay, thank you for all those perspectives, no? So I think that's all the time we have today. So before we end, so allow me to wrap up quickly, no? So thank you to all our panelists for sharing their unique perspectives, no? So they may be coming from very different fields within the MST, but because they're very interdisciplinary in nature, no, meron talagang common, there's really a connection, no, dito sa mga courses na to. And I think they've done a wonderful job of communicating yung kanilang challenges. Even this nakapangalawang SEM na tayo with the remote learning, no, hindi nawawala yung challenges in upgrading the courses itself, transitioning from pre-pandemic to completely online mode, and then also the challenges faced by the instructors, the teachers, and yung also from the perspective of the student, yung shinare ni Professor Marquez, no, with the different kinds of student responses that he gets. And this is also a good way, no, for us to reflect on how we can further improve our courses so that it really fits into yung what we want the GE courses to be, no? Or what kind, as Professor Marquez says, anong klaseng mga estudyante yung gusto natin na, di ba, ma-impart doon sa mga estudyante at maging matutunan nila when they go through our courses, na hindi lang cut and dry, o tapos na ako, tapos kakalimutan ko na lahat ng but we really want them to engage in the courses, and more importantly, yun, meron silang baon after, di ba? May natutunan sila that hindi lang sa kanila, that they can actually also share, no? And i-share nila sa ibang pamilya nila, sa immediate circles nila. So, and I guess the last one would be navigating this new environment that we have is really a challenge for everyone, no? And the panelists have really shared their perspectives on how we can actually also try to move forward with, given that this might be the majority of the time that we'll be doing instruction, right now. How can we be agile? How can we reduce risk while still holding true to our mandate, of teaching our students, our UP students, and them propagating, yung perspectives na napulot nila from the GE classes to their immediate circles. So with that, I think that ends my quick synthesis of this conversation. And I think I really had a fun time, shooting ideas with this group. So it's been really an eye opener and a learning experience for me personally. So I think I'll turn over the floor to our technical team, or to Ma'am Vanji.
Yeah, thank you, Ma'am Rachel. So let me take this time now to thank our panelists by presenting the Certificate of Appreciation. So we start off by presenting the Certificate of Appreciation to Ma'am Rachel Gotanco for imparting her invaluable knowledge as a moderator during the MS1 GEOL1 NATSI 4 DRMAPS and LARC1 GE Conversations of the UP System GE Conference 2021 with the theme Baon-Bidahan, How Did You Teach GEX in Your CU? Given this 10th day of May 2021, signed VP for Academic Affairs, Maria Cynthia Rose Banson Bautista. And then we present the Certificate of Appreciation to our panelists, Sir Franklin Fontanosa Jr., and then to Ma'am Lilibeth Salvador Reyes, Sir Edanjarlo Marquez, Sir Leopoldo de Silva, and Ma'am Aurora Odette Corpus Mendoza. So maraming salamat po for sharing your reflections and insights. And we also thank our participants to this second GE conversation this day. Meron pa po tayo mamayang hapon for the GE conversations ng Social Science and Philosophy Cluster that starts at 1:30 p.m. And tomorrow, we have the second part of the System GE Conference plenary conversations. So I'd also like to thank our secretariat. So we have Steph, Kai, and Cars, who was the one who managed the video sharing. And then the one who manned our Q&A, sila Dax at saka si Rika. And of course, we'd like to acknowledge the members of the TWG implementation present in this session. So si Ma'am Alisa Alampay, si Ma'am Nak Gabriel, si Ma'am Nera Catalbas, Ma'am Nel Faglova, si Sir Baggy Bagarinaw, and si Ma'am Leia Abayaw. So muli, maraming salamat at happy lunch po sa lahat. Medyo konti overtime, pero totoo yung sabi ni Ma'am Rachel, nag-enjoy din po ako sa mga sharings ng ating panelists. So thank you, and ingat po tayo pa rin.
Maraming salamat. Ay, meron daw photo op.
Photo op.
Yes, ma'am, tama, may photo pa. Please, open your video kung pwede. Thank you.
Okay po. Ngiti po tayong lahat. 1, 2, 3. One more. I mean, 2 more. 1, 2, 3. Last. That's it. Thank you very much.
Salamat. Thank you. Ingat.